Hello, welcome back to Chronic Lore. This is the much anticipated collaboration video. So I mentioned in one of my last videos that I would be collaborating with another YouTuber. Now this YouTuber is called DrawWithDan. So if you are over here from his channel, you are very welcome. Thank you very much for checking out my content. So if you do enjoy it, consider subscribing or like or leave a comment, anything like that. It'd be great to hear from you and let me know what you think. So without further ado, let's get started. For this particular video, I do want to walk you through some of the things that I was doing throughout the drawing. So you can see here again, like in my last videos, I'm starting with gesture drawing, and that is just outlining the shape of the body that I want to have. And it really gives you a great idea of what the shape of the body will be whenever the piece is finished, if you have done it properly, of course. If you are getting into figure drawing, I would recommend practicing this before even copying the line work of some character, because if you just copy the line work, you're not getting the understanding of the anatomy that you're supposed to have whenever you're drawing somebody. So I'd say start there, and of course then afterwards I'm just filling out the lines of Cloud as we go along with a pencil brush from Procreate. If you're paying attention to his facial area, you will notice a lot of rubbing out and then drawing the face over and over again. Sometimes whenever you're looking so closely at something, or you're not looking at it properly, or you haven't taken a step back, you just see imperfections again and again and again, and you can't see what is wrong with it. One thing I find very handy to do in Procreate is to flip the canvas horizontally so that you get a different perspective on your drawing. It's one of the things they recommend you do to see whether your drawing is in proportion or whether the overall thing is balanced. Because if you do see it from the other side, sometimes you will see that the face you're doing is really wide and it just doesn't fit on the actual head that you've drawn, which was the case here with Cloud. I had drawn his ear so far back it made his face look ginormous to start with whenever you paid attention to it, and then I was readjusting his eye height and everything just to make it look a bit more my style. I used the reference image from the game for this one, and then I converted it. I just drew it in that anime style that I'm used to and I like. And then here I am outlining my outline with a red pencil, just so that I can get the clean line, so that whenever I switch to another layer, I know exactly where the pen should go, and just to try and get the cleanest lines possible. Reducing the transparency of the sketch layer also helps me whenever I'm laying out my pen lines on the layer above, because it allows me to see precisely where those lines should be, so that I'm not distracted by any really thick or messy sketch lines from below and don't know where the pen line actually is. So for the sword here, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out overall, both now and later in the drawing. To get those straight lines, there's a feature in Procreate where if you draw a line, and it's kind of squiggly, but if you hold the pen on the page, then it will create a straight line, and you can angle that line wherever you want, and it's so handy for drawing big swords and things like that, and especially objects like this that are coming towards the screen. You can get that perspective much easier. And now we're laying down the foundation colours. You'll see a lot of flashing on the screen. Apologies for that. Flash warning, maybe I should have put that up at the start of the video. That's because I'm still not all that au fait with the program. There is a feature in Procreate as well where you can drag a colour from your palette and lay it down on the drawing, and it will fill out that area as long as it's walled off by lines. But if it's not walled off completely by the lines, or if the line is kind of patchy, it can bleed out to the entire canvas. And since this is a sped up time-lapse video, that looks like flashes whenever it happens, so apologies for that. Maybe I'll get better with that, who knows. And so from the start of the drawing, I knew that I wanted there to be two light sources for Cloud. From the left here, you can see that his hair, I have filled some of the areas in with like a reddish colour. I wanted there to be a fire on the left side, and the back of his head is covered in like a greenish blue light. I wanted that to be the sickly green light of the city in Final Fantasy VII. Overall, I'm quite happy with how the rendering went with this piece. I think his jumper turned out nicely. You get good shading there, and you get, I think, a fairly good texture of the ribbed material there. And sometimes you can see that I turn off the colors on certain layers. That is to get an idea of how the shading looks, how it's building the character. If you do turn off the base colors and you just see the shading, and you can still see the shape of the character from that shading, I think it gives you a good sense that you have done the right areas and you're making that character look 3D on the paper, or on the canvas, shall we say, not actual paper. For the light here, for the sickly green light that's kind of hitting him and highlighting his back here, I like to use a brush called Turpentine. I think I mentioned it in the link video if you want to check that out and see how I use that far more extensively in that video. I feel that it gives good texture to like leather materials or army materials that kind of need to look a bit more rough and textured and like they could protect you somewhat. It gives the appearance that surface is textured and light is bouncing around it, not just in a flat sort of glossy way. So this is a mid-video reminder to all those who are watching but haven't subscribed to subscribe below, because I put out content quite regularly now. If you're interested in digital drawing, well, this is the place to be, because I'm learning along with you so we can help each other out. So subscribe and ring that bell. Back to the video. Now this was one of my favorite parts here whenever I was texturing the sword. It's quite simple really, even though I do think it turned out well. You just get one of the pencil brushes because it's textured in and of itself, and so it has spaces in between. And because of that, it looks like little scratches on the metal. It's not just clean lines, it looks like that metal has been through wars. And I think it just gives a nice feel overall that this is not the first time that he's used this sword, it has been used many times before. And now I am just filling out some of the darker areas, and I've put in the wee holes in the sword here. For some reason I thought that this just gave the sword that three-dimensional look. I was happy enough with the sword beforehand, but whenever I added the holes and the reflections at the back there, I was like, okay, this is a pretty good sword. I don't often draw swords or metal or those types of materials, so I was pretty happy with how that turned out. And then we're just adding sparks and everything everywhere, and I'm adding highlights to the sword here. I think these turned out pretty good as well. I'm so happy with Procreate because it has just a plethora of features for artists to mess about with. For these highlights here, to give them that really shiny look, I layered airbrush and I layered red, orange, yellow, and then white to give the highlight. And for the background, I didn't want it to be too detailed, so I went with almost like a watercolor oil painty look. And I wanted Cloud to be the main focus. I wanted him to pop out of the scene, so I didn't want the background to be all that detailed. You can just see that I'm adding some lights to the buildings. I'm adding highlights to it so that it doesn't look completely 2D, but it doesn't overshadow Cloud in any way. I'm not drawing it all that bright, but I am keeping it in the tone of the rest of the piece here. For the sky, I used an airbrush, and I used a little bit of Gaussian blur later on in the drawing, not just here, to blend the line so that it doesn't look too stratified. Look at me using big words. As I mentioned earlier on in the video, I wanted some fire coming in from the left, and I had real trouble trying to just draw the fire, but then I realized that Procreate did indeed have a fire brush. So I took the shortcut and I used that, and I think it turned out okay. Again, I didn't want the focus to be pulled from Cloud too much, so I didn't want to spend too much time on that. And now, because we've got the two light sources, we've got the generator behind him and we've got the fire in front of him, we can start filling out the highlights on Cloud a bit more. The red highlights that I started to add to the front of his body and to the sword start to help him really come out from the background, and the same with whenever I start filling out the glow from the generator on his back and his trousers, and just wrap it around him just a little bit and help his hair pop out a little bit more as well. This helps Cloud really just stand out from the back of the image because we've got those two contrasting colours. If you look at the colour wheel, these two colours are on opposite sides of the colour wheel. These particular shades of red and blue, or orangey red and blue, are almost on opposite sides of the colour wheel. So they're two contrasting colours, or some might say complementary colours, and they just pop off the screen. If you do think that your image or your colouring isn't popping in some way, try and look at where they are in relation to each other in the colour wheel. That might just help solve your problem and make your image stand out a little bit more. that is the finished piece. I am pretty happy with how this turned out. I think it's a very detailed piece. There were some times that I was working very small on it, and I realized then later on that nobody would see those details unless they zoomed right in on the actual PNG source image of it, which is linked down in the description, so do check that out if you want to see that. So let me know what you do think. Again, if you're over here from DrawWithDan, you're very, very welcome. If you enjoyed the video, please like, comment, and subscribe, maybe even share it. My next video will be Death Note, but it's Death Note with a difference. So if you have seen the anime or read the manga, please do stick around for that one. So again, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Stay safe.